All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning.
Right, yeah. Call and response. Huh? I'm glad to see everybody got through the thunder and lightning today.
And hail lesson.
Oh, and hail. Oh, goodness. Well, welcome to
South. Lots of hail. Large hail.
Wow. Welcome to Primetime at BU Library. Celebrating learning beyond the classroom through the experiences and accomplishments of fellow faculty, students, and staff is what Primetime is all about. It's a collaborative project between the Friends of the BU Library, faculty development, and many other offices on campus. If you missed any presentations this season, you can find them at the BU Digital Library, which you can find on the BU Library's homepage. Today is our last Primetime of the year. And we welcome Drs. Jone, Tiffany, and Barb Hoglund of nursing as they share their teaching and learning experiences and observations using virtual reality simulation based on the virtual reality simulation educational model they have developed. Let's welcome them this morning.
So here we are. This is where we hang out all the time. Yeah, every day, all day in this is part of Nightingale Island. So we just wanted to show you that there's a place that has a waterfall and sunshine all year round. So you can come and join us if you ever are in need of some sunshine.
In February, this is the place to be if you actually aren't out.
There's probably places for people like us, maybe. So, okay. So we're going to talk today about the virtual reality simulation educational model that we came up with after running several pilots out in using simulation in Second Life for virtual simulation. So we're going to just kind of talk about our experience. We'll talk about the model, how it was developed, and kind of some vignettes about using it. So here's our objectives for the day. We want to discuss the virtual reality use for education, introduce the simulation educational model, and then discuss current and future application of the model. So first, virtual reality technology, and I think some of you in the audience have used this and are probably experts at this. It's not a new concept. It really was started in this particular Second Life was started in 2003. Kind of came out of the gaming industry, and education quickly took on and started having a presence out there. And then Linden Labs that owned Second Life decided to take away the educational discount. So then people left, educational institutions left, and now they're actually giving it back because they found that that was important to have education and educational presence out there. And so the good news is now the price is cut in half again, and the discount is back. So internet-based application, students and people actually are residents out there on the space. They call them sims or islands, and they are in the form of avatars. They communicate, attend meetings, run simulations, and there's over 150 institutions from higher ed that are involved out here. This is Nightingale Isle, so this is our island that we use.
Actually, Dr. J's island.
And so I did this for my doctoral project, and then we just have expanded it. We are now purchasing a second space right off of here that we'll talk about in a little bit. So we'll have actually 2 full sims within a couple weeks that we're going to further develop the second piece.
And this is a private island. You would not be able to get to Nightingale Isle if you didn't have permission from the owner of the island.
So if you ever want to come out, you just have to email me and I'll sign your avatar in and you can come out and use it. And so we're talking about the second space we'll use for the midwife program. I've been talking to the EDD folks about renting a little space, and this area here is a support group area, and it's all cordoned off to its own private space. And Dr. Hoglund and Sandow have been doing research. They've developed a quality of life inventory for,
we're working on assessing the quality of life of patients that have heart pumps. It's called a ventricular assist device, and those patients come from all around the region to hospitals in the Twin Cities, and they have very unique health needs, and they like to attend support groups when they come, but they have no support group out where they live in rural Minnesota, North Dakota, etc. So we are kind of in the beginning stages of developing a virtual support group for that group of people so that they can attend this. And it's actually, we're kind of thinking about doing it underwater because that's one of their limitations. They cannot take showers and bathe like normal, not people that don't have a heart pump. So we're exploring that right now. We have to have social workers involved and cardiac physicians involved and such. So that's pretty cool.
So we built that area, and there's some Tai Chi balls here. There's a canoe. You can canoe around the island. You can get in the sailboat and sail if you want. And so it's really a kind of a relaxing. That's where Zelda was sitting. So if you ever need a little bit of relaxation, you can come out and hang out on the dock. And you actually, all the literature out there talks about presence and that people feel present, and you actually feel better.
You can hear the waterfall, hear the waves.
I know it sounds
feel
crazy.
The sun, maybe not feel the sun, but
she's diagnosing me in her head. I guess she did that long ago.
You go back now.
So up here are classrooms, and so they're built. They're bombed out chapels, and they're built in the Crimean War kind of age because it's called Nightingale Island after Florence Nightingale. Again, fully functioning screens, PowerPoint screens, video screens that are all set up. There's 4 classrooms. This is a kind of an education building. This is an education building. Here's the hospital, clinic that we'll talk about, and then support group. And then the other space that'll be off of here will have some further public health. There'll be some neighborhoods, and there'll be a birthing house for the midwife group. So this is just, I'm just going to quickly run through a few slides with pictures. This was just a meeting. This person's from Scotland, and this person's from California, and then he's from Michigan. So we had a meeting because we presented at an international conference together because we're all doing work out in Second Life in education, mostly healthcare education. So we just met out there and
do they wear clothes? Look at that picture.
Oh, I know that's a bad picture. She does have clothes.
She does have clothes. You actually go shopping for your clothes, and
So we're going to have
been a halter type of a style.
The new island will have a shopping area that has scrubs and other appropriate clothes. So the students can just go shopping right there on our island. They don't have to go out because it's just like the internet. There's things out there that just need to be cautious. That you need to be cautious of. So that's why we have a private space that nobody can kind of land there and bother our students. So you can only come if you're invited. So this is a conference room right off of the clinic. And what we do is you can pop up your Google Docs right there on the screen and have a meeting. So these screens are all interactive with the internet, so you can actually play PowerPoints, videos, YouTubes, whatever you want. And so we just actually had a meeting to plan this conference and popped up our agenda right on the meeting. And then you can click on a little plus sign and it'll bring your screen in so that you can actually have your computer
just this
screen.
instead of on the screen.
And then you can click out if you want to see. There's a big education presence out there. So Virtual World Educators Roundtable meets every Thursday, and it's really 1:30 our time because Second Life is California time and Pacific time. And so they meet out there, and it's educators from healthcare, from psychology, from K to 12, from communications. And everybody meets and talks about issues that are in education and how we might use Second Life. And this is where the transcripts are all kept at the virtualworldeducator.org site. They have medical presentations. This happened to be when H1N1 was coming out, the pandemic. And they were from Connecticut and then from actually across the pond in Denmark. 2 physicians that were discussing where we are at in the 2 parts of our country. And then they had a moderator. People you teleport over, you sit down in the arena, and you just hear them talk because it's all voice activated. You can click on speak and just talk into your computer. Or you can type chat.
But this didn't actually happen in Nightingale Island.
No,
that was outside another place
yep.
in Second Life.
And then there's hundreds of support groups that are developed and evidence-based. There's big universities doing research out here with support groups. And it was all started by a woman with MS that could not leave her home. And so there's a big virtual presence for support groups as well that we hope to get our students into, and they're very welcoming for students to come and sit in there. We've given lectures out here, so you know, Zelda gives a lecture and the students all sign on, because the students all have avatars because they start out here in their junior year, and we'll talk about that. There's learning activities that you can build. Anything that you can think of, you can do out here, basically, as long as you have a builder and a scripter, that'll do it. Or maybe if you're a computer programmer, you can do it. And then you can do inclusivity assignments, cultural diversity. You can make culturally diverse avatars from all sorts of marginalized populations. And then I'll turn it over to you.
We just wanted to just talk about simulation in general. You know, simulation is something that probably was used in the airline industry long before anybody else figured it out, you know, with flight simulators. In healthcare and nursing, we're probably well into our second decade of using simulation type of activities, and these are lots of the reasons for doing that. You know, we really want to help promote safety and quality. We want to be able to give students experiences that they may not encounter in the clinical setting during our regular rotations as we're out there. So we can actually create an environment where every student has to experience a patient that is going through a code experience, or has heart failure, or has, you know, a complication of kidney disease or something like that, because we don't know what they're going to experience out in their clinical settings. They might be on an orthopedic floor for 3 rotations or something. They might not get that experience. So we can use this to help us create more of a standardized education. When we're talking about simulation, we always have something up front that we call a pre-brief, that's kind of introducing the student to whatever's going to happen in that particular scenario. Then there's the activity that happens, and it always is closed with a debriefing type of a situation. Simulations, whether they're virtual or real, we will do those kind of activities. We wanted to just really talk a little bit, you know, give you a quote from one of the authors. Wendy Nearing actually published a book called The History of Simulation in Nursing. So this is a quote from her. But basically what we're seeing here is that our nursing students that are coming to us now, they expect to see technology incorporated into their education. They're surprised if we're not doing that, or if we're not, you know, using what the latest and greatest is out there. So they're not surprised with us. It surprises us as faculty sometimes. You know, you're doing what? You know, but the students really, it's just part of their life because they are the digital natives. And we are the ones that are trying to adapt to this environment. So it's really not very difficult with this new group of students. We wanted to show you one elderly couple that we use a lot in our program. Actually, this is Henry and Eartha Williams, and they are used as part of standardized case studies that have been developed by the National League for Nursing. So that's what NLN is. ACEs means Advancing Care Excellence for Seniors. We all know that there's a senior tsunami coming, and it's important for us to be able to make sure that our students are able to care for the elderly population, which will be the vast majority of their care and practice situations. So Henry and Eartha is an elderly couple. Henry has COPD, a breathing disorder that's chronic, and Eartha has dementia. And they are introduced actually in the nursing program. Students will see Henry and Eartha in the classroom. They'll have them in, the mannequins might be assigned to the roles of Henry or Eartha. They'll see them in simulations that we do outside of virtual reality. And then what Dr. J did is she actually adapted them and built simulations within Second Life that are using the Henry and Eartha characters. So these are unfolding case studies, meaning that each time we bring Henry and Eartha to the classroom to those students, a little bit more is added about their history or what kind of medical conditions or emotional things that they might be experiencing that we as nurses can address. So this, you know, Henry and Eartha isn't a Second Life thing, it's not a Bethel thing, this is a national thing that nurses all across the country are familiar with. So it's pretty exciting to be able to do that here in Second Life. This is our model that we developed. We got the title, it's way up there. So the virtual reality simulation educational model that Dr. J and I developed, actually, probably was it last summer? I think we were sitting down. We were writing a book chapter, and at some point I said, you know, this is really a model. This isn't just, you know, how did we do this? This is the framework for how we're approaching using virtual reality simulation. And we, you know, every good model needs to have theoretical underpinnings, and constructivism really was what we realized was what we were doing without naming it. And of course, constructivism, if we think about that, you know, probably the one of the main principles is that it's facilitating learning. It's not imparting knowledge to our students and expecting them to know because we told them, but it's facilitating their learning. Other principles that go along with constructivism that are important is that it engages the student in active learning. That's going to be important. It also allows students to build on their previous learning. So as in those unfolding case studies with the NLN, it's already built that way with that, but we add a little bit more and expect them to use what we taught them last week, last semester, wherever, or in their pre-nursing, science prerequisites, whatever it might be. And then the last piece of constructivism that is really important in this model is that it requires us and expects us to have a reflection opportunity after the learning experience. That's part of it. So that's the theoretical underpinnings. The action of the model takes place in the triangle above, but we added another foundational block there that's just the designing of that simulation experience. And the first bullet point is there is that, of course, we have to have learning outcomes and objectives that guide what we're after there. The second bullet, use authentic possibilities. They have to be realistic. They have to be meaningful to the student and something that they can relate to and find in clinical practice situations. So Henry and Earth are very realistic, very authentic possibilities, and we have many more that we'll show you on a few slides coming up. And then the third bullet there, promoting meaningful and contextual learning that incorporates evidence-based practice. This isn't busy work. This isn't just fun. It's very intentionally designed so that students can reach those learning objectives and outcomes that we have developed around this simulation activity. The contextual piece meaning that they can relate to it from things before that they've learned, and they can bring it to future encounters with patient care as well. And then in healthcare, not just nursing, but in healthcare overall, we want to do make sure that we're basing our practice on the evidence. You know, what are the best practices out there? What are the practice guidelines that are out there? What is the research saying that perhaps we haven't incorporated into practice that we need to be practice changers for? So those are kind of the foundations for before we actually get into the simulation. The triangle above, the activity of the simulation is going to take part in this middle section that Dr. J is going to talk about. But the outside, I want to just point you to the very top where it says construct meaning. That's our overall goal for our students. And while they're doing that, the outside, where you can see the arrows going up, increased clinical reasoning and increased competence is one of our goals. And then on this side, increasing knowledge that's personally and professionally relevant. And those two things together reach to that point of constructing meaning in their role as a nursing professional.
Then as we get into the simulation here in the middle, that's where the actual activities take place in there. And so what we figured out after we did 3 different pilots was we really need to scaffold and evaluate as we go, especially in the courses that we do modules. So this particular example that we will show you was in a public health course, and we had 3 different modules. And so what we learned from that is that if we can do this scaffolding very well at the beginning, we can give enough orientation, because the students, the feedback from the pilots were, we'd like a little more orientation, a little more information about it. So if we can give that information up front, then the work, the simulation, they'll forget a little bit about the technology. We had an example where 2 students were sitting next to each other, and one was kind of caught up in the technology and not quite immersed, and the other one was immersed and felt like they were actually role-playing being that person. And that student said to the other student, you gotta forget the technology, just be, just do it, just become that person. And it was, I mean, and that student actually told me about that experience after, and so it was like, yeah, that's what you need to do, and not be caught up in how you move your avatar or what you're doing, but actually immerse yourself in that environment. So we want to scaffold and evaluate as we go. How are you doing? How are you doing with the technology piece of it? Because we don't want the technology to get in the way of the learning. And so, and then at appropriate intervals. And as we went up and did the 3 different simulations, I had all kinds of questions here at the beginning. The second module, I probably had 1 or 2 out of 60. The third module, 0 questions most of the time. They were, you know, their self-efficacy had raised, and we're going to start measuring the computer self-efficacy as well, because in this particular course, half of our students are, or a third probably of the students are African immigrants.
This is some CAPS.
So the CAP students for the public health piece. And so, and I figured, you know, they were really afraid of the technology at first, and they were so pumped when they figured it out, and by the last module that they could do it, that in our practice world, we have so much technology that we hope that that will transfer to practice then, because that's really our goal in education is, can you transfer that into the practice arena and actually do it? So then these make connection, social interaction, and critical reflection are all part of that constructivist framework. And some of the simulations are asynchronous, where the students actually go out and do the learning on their own and then come back to the discussion forum for their social interaction. Others are set up so that they're actually out there together solving a problem. And so it kind of depends on how it's set up. Anything more to add?
We're good. Okay, so what we want to do is actually apply that VRS model a little bit to one of our scenarios that we're using. Here you see Zelda in the public health clinic, which is on the second floor of our public health department on Nightingale Island. And what happens in this particular simulation, there's 3 modules that the students will work through, and it will be engaging with public health core competencies for practice. So it's a way that we can help walk them through those competencies of public health nursing and ensure that they've all grappled with those to the same extent in the way we want them to do, not just how they might happen upon that in their clinical setting. They're still going to clinical settings for public health, they're going to real places too, but this allows us to have something that's a little more structured and more directed as far as what's going to happen there. So, you know, that first part of designing the VRS is identifying what the learning outcomes are. So lots of words on this slide, but these were the objectives for this particular module and what we set before the students for what we wanted to accomplish. So we're not going to read all those, but wanted you to know that yes, we did do that part, and the students know what's expected of them and what kind of things they're going to be learning in that particular activity.
And this is a 10-week course, so the modules are week 1, week 6, and week 8 out of the 10-week course. And so it's kind of laid out that way. So they do their didactic information, they go out and do the sim, and then they do their debrief on the discussion forum. And it's been really rich, and we're going to start measuring some of that if we can catch up to ourselves here. Yeah. So implementation. So this group of students was all new to Second Life. None of them had ever been out there or ever heard of it before. So I did a 2-hour face-to-face orientation, and I did make an online module, learning module as well, that the students, because we have a few online programs now, so we did make an online one as well. But for this, the pilot cohort, we did a 2-hour face-to-face. They made their avatars. I helped them move. We got them signed into Nightingale Isle. We got them some clothes changed because they didn't all want to look alike.
What do you mean help them move?
Oh, you have to move your avatar, and so you have to walk and fly and teleport around. And so we covered all that information for them in a short 2-hour face-to-face. Then in this particular group, the simulation activities were asynchronous. So they went out and they did their simulated activities, and then got support. I gave them my email, my phone number, and said, text me if you get in trouble. And my favorite story was a student texted me, and I said, you know, I might be with students, or, you know, I do have a life sometimes, not very often, but so I'll get back to you as soon as I can. And so this particular student texted me and said, help, I'm stuck in the mammogram machine.
So she was in the clinic at Second Life, and she had found the mammography center.
And her whole body
was stuck in
and
the
so
mammogram
I texted
machine.
her back and I said, I'm running as fast as I can. I'm coming.
Actually, you probably flew.
I flew or teleported
over to the mammography center and helped her.
But they were always surprised because pretty soon Zelda would show up when they, you know, they text me, and then if I could, you know, I would sign on, and there'd be Zelda, you know, to the rescue. But
did she get out?
What's that?
Did she get out?
She got out. Yes. I just sent her another teleport, and she got out. So, but yeah, that was stressful for her. And so then with each module, they have individual guided reflection questions that they answer, and then they go to this discussion forum and develop working groups for this particular course. They work in groups to develop a plan. And that has been really rich because they do some of the learning on their own, and then they go to their discussion forum and develop that piece. This is an example. We had 5 different clients in the first module, which was a public health clinic. So women, infant, and children, new client. She'd had a baby. She needed some support and some extra funding for her formula and her food and nutrition. And so that was her, and we have a case study developed around each of these. And then guided reflection questions on what would you do to help this person? Here's her story. Then this is another one, single mom, 3 kids, middle child, new diabetes diagnosis. And
it wasn't me either, right?
Yeah, exactly. And this is the uncle who actually has an alcohol problem. And so these are actually real life stories from our public health faculty. And so these are all mannequins or bots, but we're working towards actually having them so that they'll talk back to the students. Right now, these scenarios are more note card driven, but we have had scenarios where faculty will sign on and role play with the students. So they'll actually role play being the uncle or being, the mom, and then the student will have to answer questions. And then this is a care conference. Elsie has a new autism diagnosis. This is in a school. So you've got the school nurse and the teachers, and so then they have to work through that scenario. The second module is a plane crash triage exercise. And what's important about that?
Well, in public health, we do talk about emergency response. That's one of the competencies that we need to talk about. But it's not very often, if at all, that our students are going to experience that in their clinical settings. And in fact, we as faculty may not have even experienced that. And we go to training, I'm part of the Dakota County response team, so we have our training that we do, and we do simulations with that. What we did here is developed a plane crash scenario so that the students can work with that and how do they respond. So we've got some ideas for some more types of emergency responses, like a flood, or maybe recreating the Lilydale mudslide. There were a couple of school nurses that were along on that trip that helped do the triage management for that school group. So we can really do some really neat things with this, that all the students then can experience this at a much higher level than we were ever able to do just in the classroom or in their clinical settings.
So this is a chemical plant, and the plane crashes into it, and then
so we got more than just the plane crash,
and they
obviously, going on
have
here.
18 victims that they have to go triage. They start with a 6-hour module that is from Washington, right?
Yes,
George Washington University.
It's a national emergency preparedness.
Yeah. So they do that 6-hour module first, then they come out and have to triage all the victims, and then they go to the discussion forum. And then this is kind of the algorithm when you have a disaster that they have to work with, and then they have to make a plan with the group. And then our third module is actually a safety module. This particular woman's house, she's an elderly woman who lives in this kind of hoarder house.
We got to put some more things in the house. It's not quite there yet.
You can't have it be too bad.
You can walk through and the mantle is not full, but we got to work on that.
So there's 60 safety violations. So the paramedics came when she broke her hip, and they reported it to public health, and then she can't return home until we deem that it's safe. So the public health nurse will make an assessment. So they have to go through the house, walk their avatar through, find the 60 safety violations, and then come back to the discussion forum and meet as a group in the discussion forum and decide on a plan for making this house safe. And so that's another role of the public health nurse.
So overall, these 3 modules that are delivered through Second Life over the course of a semester are our goals are to increase their clinical reasoning abilities, and we have measured that we are doing that, increasing their knowledge about public health nursing in general, and then also constructing meaning or new meaning for them related to those public health core competencies. Our original pilot was about 15 students. Since then, over 100 more students have gone through this, and now we are moving on really to the research phase to figure out what else can we do with this, what exactly are we learning and building on, and trying to share it and disseminate this information.
So that was the 100 CAP students, and then all of our juniors, which
juniors.
CAS nursing with between 75 and 90 students, their junior year actually go to the lower level of South Street Clinic and have 4 patients that have diabetes and a comorbidity of mental health disorder. So they've got either depression or anxiety, and then they have heart failure and other issues. And then the students have to go through and actually pull up the information in a chart. And then the faculty this year role-played 2 of the clients. So they signed on the avatar that looks like the patient has a story. and they signed on and they actually role played.
So they spend a full day in
So
Second Life with this
replacement.
type of experience. They're here at what, 7:30 in the morning, and they're take their lunch break, and they're here till late mid-afternoon.
And what we measured this year, and we haven't done crunched the numbers yet, but what we measured this year was the self-efficacy of students, how they feel actually doing care management of patients. How do you teach them how to take care of themselves when they have diabetes or heart failure or anxiety? And each of them, 5-point Likert, they went up 1 or 2 points, every person did. How they graded themselves, how they felt after they finished this day versus how they felt when they started it about working with patients.
Their confidence and their knowledge level. So that kind of wraps it up, but we do know that you might have some questions about this and what we've come from and where we've gone with all of this. So
you can show you too if you want to take a little tour.
Well, it is kind of nice out there.
I know.
On the lunch.
Any questions about what we've talked about?
One, how are your, use the term digital natives, which we can debate some other time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, I know.
There's newer terminology.
Yeah.
Those people that's always been part of their lives.
Right, exactly.
That never, ever.
What I mean is I don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Right.
But how are you finding that people who in your programs that haven't grown up with that or that are being introduced to it for the first time, how are they doing?
They're totally freaked out at first, and they're all up there. They have their computers, and I'm orienting them, and they're all up. They all come up with their computers, and they're like, "Help me, help me, help me!" And so we have them sit down and take a deep breath, and so then what we found is, if I can give them enough support, give them enough practice time, they actually do really well. And like I said, by the 3rd module, and these are all CAP students in that particular example, so, and many of them we have, 63-year-olds down to 22-year-olds in those cohorts. And so what we find is as long as we support, and then one of them, or a couple of them said to me, because I asked them, I said, so what is it about the 2nd module, besides the orientation and feeling a little more comfortable? And almost every one of them emailed me back and said, it's because we had your cell phone number, that we knew we could text you or call you, and then we thought, we're just going to try it, and we can text her if we can't get it.
But that's within the model that we developed, that's the scaffolding piece. And scaffolding, really is that intentional help to the extent that it's needed at the time that it's needed. It's the right time and place for that. So, you can flip it back to that model maybe, but the center triangle had those blue kind of smaller triangles inside of it pointing in, and the bottom one was quite large, because we know when you step into this, it's going to require a lot more. But we also have students that just catch on like this. Sometimes we'll ask for students to volunteer to become kind of the super users for their class. And so they will spend a little bit more time with us ahead of time so that they can kind of be that point person for them. But that scaffolding is so important at the beginning. We have to provide them that support. And that's not just with virtual reality simulation, that's with any kind of technology. And we do that in nursing all the time. We know that, we just taught health assessment this semester. And we had to give them so much support when they learned how to do blood pressure that very first time. But 3 months later, when we're testing it on the final, we don't have to do anything. We're up at the top of this triangle, providing minimal type of support for them. So this is something that we can use across different types of learning situations. But I don't think sometimes we think about that word scaffolding and that concept and how we're intentionally using that. And we really do that here, and we try to meet the students where they're at, just as we would in other types of skill development.
And they help each other too, so they'll sign on, and they'll find each other out there, and then they're like, well, how do I do this?
And we encourage them to find each other too, and not rely on us for the overall help that they might need.
Can I follow that with with a follow-up question? That's really redundant. What I said was redundant.
Yeah.
So if there's another program that's interested in getting involved in this kind of thing, I know, Jone, you've been incredibly involved. You're involved with Second Life whether you were in nursing or not, right?
Yeah.
You just love Second Life.
Yeah.
So you're totally into that. They have your I don't think they have your cell phone number for Second Life questions. So what I'm wondering is if there's another program that wants to get involved in this kind of thing, how does a program do that at Bethel without you? Is that a possibility right now, or is that a broader discussion that needs to happen at Bethel if other programs want to do VR?
I think there should be a broader discussion about it. With the midwife program, we're hoping to get one of the technology grants and then what we'll do is I'll get a stipend to train their faculty. And then they're going to actually use some space out on Nightingale Island. I presented to the leaders and CAPS on Monday, and the EDD program was interested too. And so there's at a point where my bandwidth is.
And there is a cost to it because there's a subscription price. You have to pay for your space.
It's about $1,700 a year. But we charge student fee now. We charge a lab fee of $10 a student or $20 a student for CAPS, and that's how that's covered.
That's $1,700 a year for the island.
Yeah, $1,700
for that island.
That's
and then,
pretty cheap.
But building the space was another cost. She built. Did you build some of it initially or tried? But she actually hires somebody. We say we want this kind of a structure that does this kind of a thing, and so they contracted them to actually build those spaces, build the classroom building or.
Well, what I told the EDD folks is, it's taken me a long time to get to this point, but I can train people really quickly. So that whole, my 3 years of, painful learning, can be really shortened.
Yeah, well, it's that, when you think of the Rogers theory of innovation, she was on that bottom left hand of that curve, and we're trying to get to the top of that, and we're coming up that slope, but we'll get there,
We have quite a few faculty that have avatars now, and we're going to do some training at our, kind of our workshop in May.
So, all well and good, and I want to know what the research is that says this translates into better performance in reality. What do you got?
I'll send you several articles that shows that, and we actually have, we're starting to collect the data for our students, that the CAS students, we have that self-efficacy increase. And so we're starting, now that we have kind of everybody on board, we're starting to do multiple data collection.
And we actually published the inclusivity study.
Yep.
Where students we gave them avatars of, they had to adopt the role of a marginalized person. And they were actually not on Nightingale Island. They went out into Second Life, and they were that person, that homeless man, that blind person, and then we did measure their ability to feel like they could care for patients from that background, and also how they could empathize.
I'm not interested in attitude change.
Right.
You don't have to convince me that.
Yeah,
I want to know that when they walk into Abbott Northwestern on their first day of the job and are faced with Eartha and Henry, that they engage with Eartha and Henry with the type of clinical reasoning that they can do on Second Life.
That's what we're trying to prove right now. Just like on the online, in that whole, uptick when they had the, is it good enough or is it as good as? When we went kind of through, or not we, but when they went through that whole trying to prove that online learning is actually as good as face-to-face, or, So that's what we're trying to go through now, and there are articles out there. I can send you some of the literature. And in simulation in general, there is thousands of articles about transfer of knowledge, about increased safety. And so what we're trying to do is show that virtual reality simulation is as good as simulation in the simulation lab.
Right.
Like a role play.
Right. So we're working on that piece of it.
So is this more expensive than in vivo role plays?
It's actually cheaper than buying a $50,000 mannequin, right? And keeping it updated and.
Pay me $50,000.
Okay, there you go.
And we do have some standardized patients that do come in.
They'll pay you $1,700
There you go.
to be there 24/7.
Free breakfast. Free breakfast for us.
We actually have several standardized patients coming in next week.
Hey, you had a comment?
I'm just wondering, because I've been in there and tried to hold classes in Second Life, and it's really hard to find a place, especially a place where I could actually use a PowerPoint or something like that.
Yeah.
So, without paying $1,700.
So that's the bigger conversation probably of, you know, and what I would like to do, what I've done and what we've done and kind of what we do in nursing is we just have a pilot to prove that, you know, this
It's
really
viable.
is viable. And so what I suggested is, you know, come out, use a corner of the space. You know, maybe we have several pilots going on in the space that we already have. And to see, and if it takes off, and if you say, this really is, you know, beneficial to the students, they're rating it highly, you're seeing change in their learning, then, you know, maybe we expand and purchase some Bethel kind of spaces. And so I think that's the, like Matt
Because our
asked,
initial students, we didn't charge fees for them, but as, you know, the pilot pieces, but then as we started to incorporate it into our regular curriculum and expectations.
and you know, your
then they have
doctoral
a fee.
projects are kind of, you know, you always kind of take those on and fund them, and so we're at the point now where we're actually rolling it out, and we'll use midwives. The seniors will be using it next year for delegation, so it'll be like a flipped classroom. They'll go into our emergency room and have 6 patients, and they'll have to do a triage, so they'll have to actually by themselves, that'll be their homework, they have to go in and actually assess all 6 patients, come up with a grid, and then they come to class, and they have to kind of duke it out where who thinks that we have to take care of this one first. So have that discussion about that piece of it. Because delegation is tough on a piece of paper in a case study. You know, here's Henry and Eartha, and then, you know, to try to take this to your paper and say, okay, so how do I imagine this? But if they're actually walking their avatars around and seeing the patients, it's more real to them. And so.
I'd be curious to hear just a little bit more about what it's like on the other side of the screen, I guess. So you mentioned there's a lot of scaffolding and how do you get past the technology. So could you tell us a little bit more about sort of what do you have to coordinate? What does it look like? What do you have to set the students up with? What is the environment? That kind of stuff. What devices?
So basically, if we're out here, so let's say these 2 avatars are out here and the student comes out, you know, and I walk around and find them because they're like, I'm in the clinic and I'm stuck, or I, you know, can't get this. So basically, what's nice about this is you can just click on speak, and then I can talk to them. And I can just either use a headset or I can talk right into my computer and say, okay, so on the bottom of your screen it says walk, run, fly. So click there, and so you just kind of talk them through it. Or I can type. So you can also chat as well. So you can type to them and have like a back chat going. So you can talk and type to each other if you need to. I can send them landmarks. So if they have to teleport to another place, I can send them a landmark right there live when we're out there. And then it's basically supporting that way by just talking to them. Sometimes their speaker won't work or whatever, so I'll say, call me. Call me on the phone, and then I'll talk you through it. And so most of them catch on pretty quickly with a few directions. And you know, it's pretty laid out here. You've got your speak, and then you set up, what's nice is you set it up like on Facebook. So you have friends and groups. And that's how I run the island, is I make groups for them, and so each person each avatar is enrolled into a group. And then I give access to that group. And then you can friend each other out there, so all the students, so then when they sign on, it'll appear up in the corner that they're here, or that they're signed on, and you can actually send them a message.
And are they typically in the classroom with you, or I know you said there are some asynchronous, but are they usually in different places, or you have them in one room together? Or?
It depends on if we're doing, so if with our pilot for Henry and Eartha, we actually did a debrief. So we put up a PowerPoint and had them all in the same room and gave them a little lecture. And that actually, you can sign on in the computer lab, or they can sign on
You mean
from
the same
home.
room in Second Life, or the same?
Same room in Second Life.
Okay, at the same.
Yeah, so they're all in there, and then you're giving the pre-brief with the PowerPoint. For purposes of the the simulation. Sometimes some work ahead, so they may sign on and be over at the plane crash. And I can pull up a map here and I can see where everybody is. So I can click on this map and then it'll give me a little, oops. That's the wrong one.
There's some interesting things in
Yeah,
the
there's some
second life
interesting,
outside
which
of
we try
Nightingale.
to.
But that's life, too.
So you can do a mini map or a world map, and so then you can see who's around you here. For my friends online, I can click or hover over these places and see who it is that's here, or click on it and go there. So you can do all kinds of, and I have, you know, kind of ultimate control over the who we let on and who we don't, and where everybody is. We also can put trackers. So for our research, we're going to put a tracker out, and the patients will know this, that there'll be a tracker on the support group area, so that part of the research is, we think, we're postulating that people who are chronically ill and isolated, like these particular individuals are, they may make friends, they're friends from the support group from all around. And if they're feeling lonely, they may sign on to see if anyone's out there. And that's what they find in the other support groups that they run. And so we can track how many times they sign on as part of the research to see.
So what we do in here is not unlike what we do in our real labs, in our physical
It's really
lab
just,
studies.
yeah,
We're doing the same thing. How are you doing behind this curtain? What do you need help with? Well, let me help you. You need to do it. This is going to work better for you. We're just doing in virtual reality. So it's something that, as nursing faculty, we're very used to coming alongside of them anyway, in that kind of learning situation.
So it's just, I guess the answer is it depends on the situation. But you can use it for synchronous, asynchronous. You can set up modules where they can click through themselves and then come back. But we always, it's really important to always come back to some kind of either live debrief or discussion forum or reflection paper to
move you to the next level.
To that next level of thinking. So, all right.
Thank you.
Well, thanks for coming. Let me know if you want to come out and play.